Hi folks, Dr. Cywes. I am the carb addiction doc, but I'm also an MD, Ph.D, and I've done a lot of work in physiology and metabolism. So today I just love this about the human body. Today we're going to discuss energy traffic a little bit in general, just to give you the perspective, and then we're going to do a deep dive into protein as a product in the human body. And the first thing to understand is that all energy, and my friend Richard Feynman will argue about this a little bit, but I'm trying to simplify it for the lay public. All energy is contained, that human beings can release, is contained in three separate molecular bonds. Okay, three molecules with bonds in between them. And all energy goes into the human body in that form. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, CHO. And every molecule that we consume for energy, it's contained in those three molecules and arranged in a certain formula. So for example, if you look at sugars, glucose, galactose, fructose, allulose, those are a 6-ring carbon structure, CCCCCC, with oxygen and hydrogen in different arrangements. And the way they're arranged, we call it either glucose, hydrogen, or oxygen. And through special arrangements, they can be tied up into a chain like a string of pearls, and we call that a starch. Okay? We call that a starch. So, but it's uniquely a molecule made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And in various ways, the human body has the enzymes, the pathways that can release or transfer that energy from those molecules to other molecules that are usable in the human body, still contain CHO. So for example, fructose has the highest amount of usable energy. Glucose and then galactose, even though they're 6-ring structures, that's the way the human body produces them, but glucose being the most dominant one. Allulose, exactly the same molecule, but the human body does not have the enzymes to release the energy from the structure of allulose. And Ben Bittman can talk a lot more about that. That's the 4 sugars. But the 3 that we use, dominantly glucose and fructose, and then galactose, which really only occurs in dairy products. Okay, CHO. The second CHO molecule, fat, all ketones made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And again, a chain of carbon molecules, and they can be anywhere from 2 carbon molecules all the way up to ultra-long fatty acids. They're usually even-numbered, but now even uneven numbers are out there. So we see these carbon molecules in chains of fat, again, containing energy. And the energy is in carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The third big one, and we've got other ones, lactate and a few others, creatine, but the third big one that we consume is protein. Again, all the energy contained in 3 molecules, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in the chains that form them. And all protein is made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So no real difference between the 3 elemental molecules, just the structure defines glucose, fatty acids, ketones and fatty acids, and protein. The one thing about protein though, protein is defined by an extra molecule. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And by understanding and knowing nitrogen, we can follow the path of protein through the human body or through any animal's body. So we're going to talk today about nitrogen metabolism and what controls its mechanics, because with a rampant interest in the carnivore or carnivore-based diet, it is essential that we understand nitrogen and we don't misuse the concept of protein. So I'm going to do a deep dive into that. But here's the other cool thing about the human body. I talked about those 3 molecules, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, locked into glucose, locked into fatty acids, locked into protein. Well, here's what the body universally does. Those products enter the cytosol, the cytoplasm, and then enter mitochondria, which is where that energy gets transferred to ATP, ADP, energy-containing molecules that can then be used to drive certain functions in our body. But on the outside, So glucose, CHO goes into the mitochondria. The energy is spun off in ATP. What comes out the back end? This is the beauty about the human body. Two molecules. H2O, water, which we pee out, and CO2, carbon dioxide, that we breathe out. Isn't that incredible? So if you want to look at human energy, CHO going in, carbon dioxide, water coming out. Human biology 101. That is the way the body works. And a healthy mitochondria can convert all three of those into energy. It's beautiful. Liver has a role to play. Every cell has a role to play with those mitochondria, most cells. Okay? Hi, folks. This is Dr. Cywes. I am the carb addiction doc. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what my evenings look like. I come home after a long day of work. I love what I do, but I come home pretty exhausted. Take my dog for a walk, play with my son, have dinner, and then I spend some time with my son until he goes to bed at about 7:30, by the latest 8 o'clock. So we hang out. After that, I'm now trying to write papers, I've got to shoot videos, I've got things to do in the evening, and I'm just wiped out, exhausted. By the way, we don't have TV at home. And one of the things I do if I'm relaxing is I will do my Kingfisher rooibos tea. If I'm dragging a little bit and I'm struggling, I may do my tea, but I'm also going to throw down one of the Ketone IQs. It just helps me to refocus, to start my work, whether I'm doing a study, whether I'm writing a paper, whether I am planning talks. I do a lot of that extraneous work at night, whether I'm editing videos with James. Those are the things I do. And in order to focus, I will have a Ketone IQ at night. And the beauty is these Ketone IQs do not contain caffeine. They give me that boost to focus, but they do not interfere with my ability to go to sleep. In fact, if I do a Ketone IQ about an hour, hour and a half before I go to sleep, I do that work, I can relax, I take my dog for a walk before I go, and I get a great night's sleep. So try it and see if it works for you. So now let's focus specifically on protein. And protein gets used in two different ways. Protein can either be used primarily in the liver under a process called gluconeogenesis as a source of energy, in which case the CHO becomes carbon dioxide and water, and the nitrogen has to be released. Come back to that. Or protein, amino acids, as protein goes into the body, it only goes in as amino acids. It doesn't go into the body as protein. So all those people taking collagen, you're just wasting your money. Plenty of collagen in meat, but in any case, the gut's just going to break that down to individual amino acids. So you're wasting your money. Be that as it may, those amino acids go to the liver, and under the influence of insulin and a few other hormones, the liver reproduces those as certain hormones, enzymes, and proteins. And those proteins then get shipped out to the cells as albumin, as globulin, as protein, and they go to the cells, and in the cells, you can reformat that at a cellular level into different types of proteins that are part of the structure of those cells in the membrane as enzymes and as hormones within that cellular structure. So those are what I call structural proteins. And then what the human body is continuously doing, the human body is one of the most busy construction sites in the, of anything. We're continuously reprocessing, breaking down, reforming, and there's this whole reuse industry within the human body where we're reusing, breaking amino acids down, reusing them, releasing some energy as creatine, as energy in mitochondria. There's this whole dynamic of reuse within the body, repurposing, reusing, rebuilding, breaking down. The body is very dynamic. It's a construction zone. So when you look at nitrogen for energy or protein ingestion, what nobody knows, and nobody can tell you, is how much protein is going to be used for energy. And remember, the human body prioritizes above all else energy provision, because without energy provision, you're dead very quickly. So everything goes toward energy, and depending on adequacy of energy provision, not just to the liver, but to the cells themselves, depending on the adequacy of energy provision, then secondarily, those other molecules, whether it's fat, whether it's glucose, whether it's protein, gets used for structure. But the priority is toward energy, both in the liver and at a cellular level. So nitrogen intake the amount of protein you take in has neither an upper or a lower limit. Okay? There is no body principle that regulates how much or how little protein you consume. If you're a vegan, you're automatically consuming extremely little, but there's no signal that says you need more. That's why musculoskeletally, most vegans don't look so good, aesthetically, in my opinion. On the other hand, if you're a pure carnivore, there is no upper limit to how much protein you eat. There's no stopping point for protein. Fat in our food is a satiety trigger. So fat triggers satiety. But if you're eating lean protein, there's no limit. And it's very important to understand that, because we then have to have respect for how much we actually need and to try to make sure that that is regulated in the right way. And no gum flapper on the internet can tell you how much you specifically need, and you don't know how much you need on any given day. But if you add fat to your protein, that fat will limit the amount you're eating, not the protein. So try not to eat lean protein. Always use fat as a satiety signaler. And why fat? Because fat is a very usable form of energy if you're in ketosis. So you spare the protein from being a source of energy. But it still may need to be converted to energy if you're consuming excess, because the other part, there is no store for protein. There's no store for protein. There's a store for fat in our fat cells. There's a store for glucose as glycogen in our liver and in our cells. But there is no store for protein as an energy source. Our muscles are not a store. They have a vital function. And by the way, isn't this cool, folks? Glucose that is stored in plants is called starch. Glucose that is stored in animals is called glycogen. Just a little tidbit that always fascinates me. Okay, so when it comes to nitrogen, when it comes to protein consumption, there's a big difference between the way we handle it and the way vegetarian animals handle it. When we eat protein, enzymes in the gut, enzymes from the pancreas, break whatever we eat as protein. Doesn't matter if it goes in as a steak, an egg, a glass of wine, or beans. Doesn't matter how the protein goes in our mouth. From the mouth, all the way through the upper digestive tract in the small intestine, those complex proteins are broken down into individual amino acids. And then those amino acids are taken up by the intestine and go into a single blood system called the portal venous system and traffic up to the liver, where under the influence of certain hormones, thyroid hormone, human growth hormone, testosterone, male and female, and insulin, those four hormones, that protein is restructured into usable proteins, albumin, globulin, and we can measure that total protein, and then certain enzymes, certain hormones for shipping out to the cells. Those are your four anabolic or protein-forming hormones. So the gut breaks it down, and then we rebuild them. So it doesn't matter what goes in your mouth. Doesn't matter what goes in your mouth, as long as you've got all 20 or 21 amino acids that we need, and some are actually interchangeable. It's the essential amino acids that we need. In the liver, you can actually turn certain amino acids, non-essential ones, into other amino acids, but not the essential ones. So we can create that construct, but we need to absorb the 11, I think it's 9 or 11 essential amino acids. We have to absorb those. They have to be plentiful in our food. And there are certain plant products where we don't have all of the essential amino acids. So we can get malnutrition because of that. Eat a lot of protein, but kwashiorkor, for example, is too much corn, and corn doesn't have, I think it's methionine that it's missing. And this is talking off the top of my head from 30 years ago. But one of those amino acids, you can't construct adequate protein. So those kids all have very lean musculature and a big belly. Even though they're getting enough calories, they're not getting enough protein for structural resources. So they are protein energy malnourished. Okay? And that's called kwashiorkor. Be that as it may, and that still is true for vegetarians and vegans, even in this country. They may look okay, But if you look at them with a little pot belly, that's not just a testosterone effect. That may be a certain type of amino acid, essential amino acid, that is missing from their diet, and they cannot form adequate protein. So they develop this intestinal fat because their testosterone levels are fairly high. They develop this intestinal organ fat because they can't turn the protein into sugar, into real protein, the amino acids into real protein. So they turn that protein into sugar, and then the liver turns that into fat and stores it centrally. Ha! Wow, you're learning so much here. I hope you're following me. I hope you can understand that. So a lot of the vegetarians can actually be protein energy malnourished. We think of these starving little kids in Africa with the big pot bellies and the red hair, kwashiorkor, but modern vegans, modern vegetarians can still have that same condition, but we never diagnose it because we don't look for it. If you look for it, you can find it. And that's why they have the little pot bellies. Okay, so in plant-based animals, they also have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in the gut that can break some of that protein down and then reform other proteins, other amino acids in the gut. That nitrogen transfer by bacteria in the gut. Human beings don't have that. Humans do not have that. Ruminant animals do, but humans do not have that. So we do not have a mechanism to control nitrogen elimination in our gut, nitrogen transformation. We don't have those bacteria. We don't have those bacteria, okay? So we cannot excrete nitrogen-containing substances adequately in our diet. Adequately in our feces, okay? So in humans, when we use that protein, when we break it down for energy, this carbon dioxide, the water, we know how those get eliminated. By the way, in order to eliminate water, you need salt. But carbon dioxide and water, lungs and urine. However, the nitrogen stays behind. The nitrogen stays behind. And there are only two major ways to eliminate nitrogen in humans. The number one way in which humans eliminate nitrogen is as a soluble waste product. We produce ammonia, NH3, NH4, and we turn that through the urea acid cycle. We turn that to urea or uric acid. Sorry, to urea, blood urea nitrogen, not uric acid. Blood urea, a soluble form of nitrogen, and you can measure that in your blood work called BUN. And that we pee out. And when you look at BUN numbers, and I look at these on every patient I see, you can look at BUN and you can see if it's high or low. And BUN levels tell us so much about the patient's diet. So first thing is, almost all of BUN reflects protein metabolism. In other words, BUN is a production molecule. Occasionally in some people with severe kidney damage, because the kidneys eliminate BUN. If your BUN is high and you've got bad stage 3, stage 4 chronic renal disease or acute renal failure, your BUN can rapidly rise because you cannot eliminate it from in your urine. So there is a small percentage of patients where it's an elimination problem, a kidney problem, and that's one of the reasons why the nephrologists that only see kidney problems blame protein, because BUN is high. But that's not a protein problem, folks. It's a kidney problem. And yes, if your liver is failing, your urea cycle doesn't work that well, you cannot process that ammonia, and your ammonia levels in your bloodstream go high, and you can get mental issues. For example, we see that with alcoholics. But those are disease states. The majority of us, you can look at the BUN, and it is a production, it's an energy production issue. And there are two reasons why you produce BUN in excess. Number one, if you are energy deficient, and there are two causes of energy deficiency, then you triage those amino acids primarily toward energy, toward gluconeogenesis, and you produce high levels of nitrogen or upper levels of nitrogen. The first one is in starving people. So in our anorexics, in our bulimics, in our starving people, they will triage those amino acids preferentially to nitrogen. Their BUN will be very low, and they won't have a lot of muscle. Okay? Similarly, for people who are insulin resistant. So if you've got insulin resistance and you cannot produce a lot of insulin, you may look nice and skinny, but you can't get the sugar into the bloodstream. The cells are saying, dude, I need more energy. The high levels of insulin are blocking fat mobilization. So what does the liver do? It overproduces sugar from nitrogen. But it's a futile cycle because it can only see a lack of energy in the cells. It cannot see the blood sugar. The human body has no metric for measuring blood sugar. So even though your blood sugar levels are high, the cells are saying, dude, I'm starving because of insulin resistance. And the liver is turning gluconeogenesis on like crazy. You're eating more, you're hungry all the time, and you think you're eating a lot, but you're not supplying the cells with energy, and all your protein is going toward energy, and your muscles are vanished. And I've talked about this a little bit in so many of my son, Rian, who's 4 years old, in the kids that are eating a ton of sugar. Obviously, the obese ones are out there, they're just storing that sugar as fat. But in the skinny ones, they got no muscle. Why have they got no muscle? Because they're not converting, they're not eating enough protein, they're not turning it into sugar, and the little bit of protein they're eating is becoming sugar because their blood sugars are so high and their nitrogen and their insulins are so high. So that is energy starvation, where you're producing a lot of nitrogen. Now, in our carnivore patients, whoa, you got to eat so much protein, you got to eat 6 pounds of protein per meal, and all the gum flappers that focus on protein are doing you a major disservice. Here's something very, very important to understand. It is impossible to undereat protein on a carnivore diet. You should never, ever, 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 ever worry about protein on a carnivore diet, no matter who you are. Whether you're Sean Baker or bump on a log like me, doesn't matter. Don't ever let anybody tell you how much protein you should eat, or chase the protein, or be afraid you're not eating enough protein. Because it's impossible to undereat protein on a carnivore diet, because everything we eat contains protein. Whether it's eggs, whether it's dairy, whether it's beef, whether it's pork, whether it's fowl, chicken, whether it's fish or seafood, there's tons of protein. The problem is a lack of fat. Fat doesn't protect us, so the protein's being triaged toward energy. And if I look at the average carnivore or carnivore-based person, anybody eating more than 60% of their meals as animal-based product, I can look at the BUN, and if that BUN is elevated, and it depends on who you are, if you're a 5'2" woman who doesn't do a lot of exercise versus a 6'5" beast that's playing in the NFL, obviously the BUN is going to be slightly different, but my typical range is around 16 to 22. Once it gets higher, once it gets below that, no matter who you are, you have a protein energy malnutrition problem. And if your BUN is very high and you don't have kidney damage, you are eating too much protein, and your body has to store that excess protein. Well, it's got no way to turn the protein into muscle. A little bit, yes, but not a lot. And then the rest has to be turned to sugar by the liver. That's why carnivores' A1Cs are going up. That's why carnivores' blood sugars are going up. Why is my blood sugar up? I'm not eating carbohydrates. Because you're overeating lean protein. And the only way you can do that is through gluconeogenesis, to turn it into sugar, to turn it into fat, and to store it as fat. And that's why your AST may be, at least your AST and ALT are high. That is why your creatinine may be a little high. That is why your triglycerides are going to be high, your HDL is going to be low, because you are in sugar production mode from protein. So don't let those people tell you you're eating, you got to chase the protein. Okay? The third component, or the other component in which we get rid of nitrogen, is in uric acid. And uric acid for humans is typically formed by fructose. I don't want to go down that road. If you're not eating carbohydrates, you're not eating fructose, let's make that assumption, then uric acid is a measure of protein waste. Protein waste. And uric acid is very pro-inflammatory, can increase your risk of cardiovascular inflammation, and also can cause inflammation of your joints, your ligaments, and can concentrate in the kidneys and cause the second commonest form of kidney stones, which is uric acid stones. So protein excess can actually cause harm on the uric acid side. So the interactions between urea, ammonia, creatinine, creatine, uric acid all depend on how much protein you're eating and how much you're taking in. And that is specific for what we call monogastric animals, animals with a single stomach, not your ruminants or your cows that have multi-chambered stomachs. And the amount of nitrogen you are consuming and the recycling of those amino acids. Because remember, the majority of your nitrogen that you're peeing out is actually recycled in the body, and all you're doing by eating is topping up a small amount of protein for that gets turned into energy. When you go to the gas station and you've got a 60 gallon tank of gasoline tank, you don't put in 60 gallons of gas, you just top it up. And yet when you're eating, you're trying to eat all the protein that you think you need in a day without accounting for that is being recycled in the body, which is by far the majority. So in an era of abundance, we're way overeating nitrogen, and we are, as carnivores, getting into trouble because of the massive amount of protein and nitrogen that we're producing. The most important interim stage that you want to prioritize after the consumption of protein is the biosynthesis of new proteins. The reason you're eating protein is mostly to create more protein. If you're in ketosis, you don't need much energy, and a little bit, a tiny fraction, goes to support blood sugar. But the majority should be protein biosynthesis. But if you don't understand your own personal biology, if you haven't looked at your own blood work, you don't know how much of that is going to support protein. And if you're not exercising, very little of it is. So all of these things factor into it. And when I see my patients in consultation, we discover all of this, we look at those numbers, and we give you guidance based on those numbers. But if you don't know how to read those nitrogen numbers, you're in all kinds of trouble. So the most important stage, the most important reason for protein consumption is for protein biosynthesis. You don't want to interfere in that equation, and you don't want to have to deal with excess protein and store it as a substrate, as sugar and as fat. And the most important fixed process in every human body is protein biosynthesis. There's a very, very tight threshold, and you will not overproduce protein no matter how much you exercise. Now, how to influence that? If you take testosterone, you can influence it. If you're insulin sensitive, you can influence it. If your human growth hormone is positive, so you can either take HGH or trigger it from your own brain, those are the ways in which you manufacture more protein. So you can influence protein biosynthesis. And the commonest way we see it is with people, males and females, taking testosterone. HGH is the other one, but people frown on HGH, even though I think HGH is a better hormone than testosterone if you're not an elite athlete. But growth hormone stimulates protein synthesis by means of somatomedins. Okay. The thyroid gland, T4, and in particular T3, free T3 levels, are controlled by the hormone stimulating the thyroid gland, TSH, and directly triage protein biosynthesis as well as cholesterol. And cholesterol and protein have to go hand in hand. That's why we see an increase in cholesterol production when we're using protein properly. Insulin controls protein biosynthesis and blocks the breakdown of protein. Somatostatin, on the other hand, which comes from carbohydrates, inhibits growth hormone, inhibits testosterone, and inhibits insulin, as well as thyroid hormone. And then if you are in a very high adrenaline-driven state, the antidote to adrenaline is cortisol. You can't really measure cortisol. You can try to, but it's meaningless. But continuous production of cortisol directly inhibits protein synthesis and stimulates protein degradation. So having periods of your life where you de-stress is going to help you toward protein synthesis. And one of the best ways to de-stress is actually paradoxically with physical activity. Going for that walk, going to the gym, doing something physically active, which triggers the hormones that produce that protein, relaxes you, gets the adrenaline levels down, get the cortisol levels down, and is pro-formation of protein toward muscles. The control mechanism of protein turnover is both genetic, as well as exercise, as well as autophagy, or the breaking down, proteolysis. And we have to take all of that into recognition when we look at you as a unique individual. And I can look at your blood work and give you an answer, but I cannot give you I will not give you a generic answer about how much protein you should be eating. I can tell you more or less, but it's based on the biofeedback of your of your biology. Now remember one other thing, and this goes to all those gym rats, everybody that criticizes me for looking the way I do. I'm fine with the way I do, I'm working at it. But all those gym rats, all those Adonises that look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the gym, remember he used testosterone. Remember that, okay? Be that as it may, I admire and I like the gym rats. I like a good physique. But here's an important concept to understand. And I know it's not directly true, but it's absolutely true. Let's look at cows. Let's look at cows. And we'll look at two cows. They're both out in the field eating natural grass. They're out in the prairie, just like buffalo, roaming around, eating their grass. And this is where the genetics comes in. One cow takes that grass and turns it through bacteria and funguses in their stomach and through their own genetic biology into massive amounts of protein that they then store as muscles. Your big Angus cow. And that Angus cow is not doing push-ups on the prairies. It's not running uphill all day long. It's not doing HIIT zone 2 training. In fact, most of the time it's just eating and hanging out. It is not doing a lot of exercise, and yet it is this massive, bulky, muscular cow. On the other side, you've got, and that's that big black cow. On the other side, you've got your black and whites, you've got your Holstein cows, you've got your Jersey cows. The Holsteins are the black and whites, the Jerseys are kind of that tan-colored cows. They look terrible. They look a bit like me. They're lumpy, they're bony, they may be a little bit fat, big fat bellies, but no muscle. You can see their hip bones standing out, but they got udders. I'm not a tit, but they've got udders this big, and their biology, their genetics is to take those same proteins and those same products that they're eating through the bacteria in their gut, through what the genetics are doing, and they turn it into milk. They also are not doing any more or any less exercise than the Angus cow. So for all you gym rats, for everybody who says, oh, you must exercise. Yes, absolutely, I agree with the exercise, but do not let the exercise be a predictor of your muscular health. I would say it's the other way around, okay? Yes, you can exercise your way that way. But think of that cow example, and not everybody has to be a gym rat. So understand the biology. I know you're going to rail against it. I'm not arguing against exercise. I'm not arguing against exercise. But I want you to think about that cow that's eating the food that is designed for that cow, the prairie grasses. Genetically, one becomes the big muscular one becomes the angular cow with a big udder. But none of them are like a vegan with a big belly and no muscle on their arms. Think that one through, folks. So just to put that aha moment out there to those people particularly who are not gym rats and never will be. It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to. And for everybody arguing about zone 2 and zone 3 and this exercise and that exercise better, the concept of physical activity is an important one. And you might have something that works for you. You might believe that this amount of protein is right for you. But let's figure out objectively what the truth is by looking at your blood work, by looking at some of your hormones, and by seeing how we can trigger certain things. I am the Carb Addiction Doc. Hopefully this makes you think, and if you want to know about your own protein consumption, if you don't want to know what your ratios are, if you want to know how to tweak your diet, or perhaps tweak your exercise protocol, give me a shout. 561-517-0642. Till next time.